goes from 9% to about 13.5%. That's a 49% increase in click rate. Is it more important to have the guest favorites badge or to be a superhost? Now, of course, ideally you would have both. But what we found was that the difference is pretty similar with one minor difference. Now, we analyzed all of the customers on IntelliHost and figured out what happens when somebody gets the Superhost badge. So we looked at before they had the Superhost badge, analyzed their overall impressions, first page impressions, and clicks, and then analyzed after that happened to figure out what was the impact. So we did that both with Superhost status and we did that with the guest favorites badge to analyze the difference between the two. So let's look at that. Let's look at guest favorites first. And the overall impressions before the favorites badge was 172 average daily impressions. Now, after they got the guest favorites badge, it jumped to 240. That's a 40% increase in top line impressions from getting the guest favorites badge. So there's pretty significant increase there.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Superhost was almost identical to that. So they went on an average of 188 average daily impressions to 267 average daily impressions for an increase of 42%. So almost sixes, you get about the same percent increase in overall impressions from having both guest favorites badge and Superhost. Now, the difference starts to appear when we look at the first page impression rate. When you get the Superhost badge, the first page impression rate goes from 42.7% on average to 55%, which is about a 29% increase in first page impression rate. Really, really strong.
I like the sound of that.
For those that got the guest favorites badge, the increase is a little bit less. So they go from about 48% to 56% for a 17% increase, which is still very strong, but not quite as strong as the Superhost. Now, the opposite is true when we look at click rate. Now, click rate is every time you go from being seen in search to actually being clicked on and somebody actually opening your listing. And what we see is that the guest favorites badge on average goes from 9% to about 13.5%. That's a 49% increase in click rate.
Wow.
And that actually makes sense because the guest favorites badge is very, very prominent in the search result. Compare that to the Superhost badge where the click rate goes from 8% to 11.8%. Still significant, but it's about a 41% increase versus the 49% increase that you see from guest favorites. And Superhost is just not as prominent. It's got like kind of a darker background, white text, and people seem to be more likely to click on a guest favorites badge more than they seem to be likely to click on a Superhost badge.
I like that one.
I hope that helps. And the takeaway here is, of course you want both, but if you have to pick one, it seems like overall guest favorites seems to have more impact right now as far as the data we've collected to date. And if you had to pick one, guest favorites might be the place to focus.
I am better than everybody.
Especially if you're having a problem with your click rate. If that's the problem your property is having more, then you really need to do what it takes to get that guest favorites badge. So let's talk a litlittle bit about how Airbnb defines how to get the guest favorites badge.
I will do whatever it takes.
There's 5 bullet points that they put on their website as to what qualifies for the guest favorites. Number 1 is overall star rating and guest feedback. It says feedback and guest reviews, so it seems like they may even be using AI to analyze the review itself to determine if there's something in there that would disqualify you from having a guest favorites. Category ratings for check-in, cleanliness, accuracy, host communication, and location value. So they're actually looking at the different categories that are in the review. There's like 5 of them, I think, that they're looking at to see if there's maybe one of them, like cleanliness is too low. I would assume they're going to use that as a disqualifier.
We got to get this place cleaned up.
The third bullet they put on here is host cancellation rates. If you're canceling guests on that property, they're probably just going to disqualify you. The fourth one is quality related incidents reported to Airbnb customer service. So if Airbnb gets too many complaints on this property, that'll disqualify it as well.
You complained about me?
And then the fifth one is a minimum of 5 reviews. So you have to have 5 reviews minimum to even qualify for the guest favorites badge. Now that seems like a new bullet. We read these requirements when it first came out, and that last one was not there when they first put it in there. So it seems like they're starting to increase the criteria just a little bit. So if you don't see your guest favorites badge and you have less than 5 reviews, that's why. If you want to know what else works on Airbnb, hit subscribe.